Ma'am, this courtroom is no place for janitorial staff. Would you stay silent if you were humiliated in public like this? The words hung in the air like smoke, refusing to dissipate as they spread across the polished oak and leather-bound volumes that lined the federal courtroom. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the assembled attorneys, their expensive wool suits and silk ties rustling as they shifted to get a better view of the woman being addressed. You're standing as the attorney's section. Please leave before you embarrass yourself further. The woman who stood near the plaintiff's table didn't flinch. She was in her late 30s with intelligent eyes that revealed nothing of what she might be feeling at that moment. Her gray dress was simple but impeccably pressed. Falling to just below her knees, her shoes, while visibly worn at the edges, were clean and serviceable. She carried a thin manila folder in hands that were unadorned except for a modest gold wedding band. No manicure, no statement jewelry, no designer handbag slung over her shoulder. In the hierarchy of the courtroom, where status was measured in billable hours, prestigious firm names, and the weight of one's legal credentials, she registered as invisible. Or worse, as an intruder who had wandered into sacred territory reserved for those who had earned their place through the right schools, connections, and pedigrees. What none of them realized as they exchanged knowing glances was that the woman they had just humiliated would soon become the most influential person in the room. Rain tapped against the tall windows of the Boston courthouse that Monday morning, creating a gentle percussion that contrasted with the tense atmosphere inside. The docket was full, and the courtroom buzzed with the controlled chaos of pre-trial motions and procedural hearings. Junior associates clutched coffee cups and legal pads, while senior attorneys greeted each other with the familiar nods of adversaries who had crossed swords many times before. Clara Jensen had entered, quietly pausing at the back to brush droplets of rain from her shoulders before making her way forward. Her movements were purposeful but unassuming. She didn't command attention because she had never needed to. Her strength came from a different source, one that couldn't be recognized at first glance. She approached the clerk's desk with a quiet dignity. "Good morning. I was hoping to observe the proceedings in the Lopez case this morning. It's on the docket for 9:30. The clerk barely glanced up, gesturing vaguely toward the gallery. "Public seating is back there." "Thank you, but I was told I could wait briefly near counsel's table. Maria Lopez is representing herself, and I've been helping her prepare." That's when the first comment cut through the air. A young attorney in a sharp navy suit looked her up and down before turning to his colleague. "Looks like someone wandered in from the janitor's closet," he said loud enough for those nearby to hear. Another lawyer, a woman with immaculately highlighted hair styled in an expensive bob, didn't bother to lower her voice. "Sweetheart, the public seating is over there. You're not supposed to be this close to counsel tables." Clara met her gaze evenly. "I understand. I was told I could wait here briefly." Before she could explain further, the heavy doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. The bailiff's voice rang out with practiced authority. "All rise. The United States District Court for the District of Massachusetts is now in session." The Honorable Judge Franklin Jensen presiding. The rustle of bodies rising filled the room as Judge Franklin Jensen strode to the bench, tall and distinguished, with silver at his temples and piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. He commanded respect with his mere presence. Known for his fair but exacting standards, attorneys both feared and admired him in equal measure. Everyone stood in deference to his position. Everyone except Clara, because she hadn't come for the trial itself, she had come for the people in it. 10 years earlier, Clara Jensen had been on track to become a partner at one of Boston's most prestigious law firms. With degrees from Harvard Law and a natural talent for litigation, she had been marked for greatness in legal circles. Then came the case that changed everything. A pro bono matter involving a mother of 3 fleeing domestic violence, unable to secure a restraining order because she couldn't afford adequate representation. Clara won that case, but it revealed a truth she couldn't ignore. Justice was too often determined by resources rather than merit. So she made a decision that shocked her colleagues and delighted her future husband, then a rising star in the judiciary. She walked away from corporate law to found the Jensen Initiative, a nonprofit dedicated to providing legal assistance to those who needed it most. Domestic violence survivors, families facing eviction, immigrants navigating a complex legal system. While Judge Franklin Jensen's career placed him in the public eye, Clara worked in the shadows, preferring substance to spotlight. She chose practical clothes over designer labels, functional accessories over status symbols. Her power came not from appearances, but from the lives she changed. She had come to court that day because of Maria Lopez, a former resident of a shelter served by the Jensen Initiative. Maria was facing eviction from her apartment on technically flimsy grounds, a retaliatory move by a landlord angry that she had reported code violations in the building. With 3 children and a minimum wage job, Maria couldn't afford to lose her home, but she also couldn't afford an attorney. Clara had spent hours in helping her prepare documents and coaching her on courtroom protocol, but had promised to be there in person for moral support. Clara wasn't appearing as counsel. She was simply there as a human being who cared about another human being's fate. The courtroom wasn't prepared for such a simple act of compassion. As the preliminary matters proceeded, Maria arrived clutching a disorganized stack of papers, her hands trembling with nerves. Clara gently approached her, offering to help organize the documents before her case was called. That's when a young associate from the landlord's legal team stepped forward. With a dismissive glare at Clara, he said sharply, "Obstructing proceedings is contempt, ma'am. This isn't some charity event." Clara stepped back, her face composed even as her cheeks flushed slightly. "I apologize, I was just helping Ms. Lopez organize her papers. That's what attorneys are for," the associate replied. "If she can't afford one, that's hardly our concern." Before Clara could respond, another figure approached, a woman in her 50s wearing a charcoal Armani suit that conveyed both wealth and authority. This was Harper Wren's senior partner at Wren Blackwell and Associates, representing the landlord. Her reputation for ruthless efficiency preceded her. She specialized in representing property management companies against tenants, and her record of victories was nearly unblemished. Harper gave Clara a scathing glance, taking in her simple attire with undisguised contempt. "This is why we have courtroom dress codes," she announced, directing her comment to her junior associates, but ensuring her voice carried. "Honestly, what kind of message are we sending if anyone dressed like this can approach counsel's table?" Laughter rippled through the younger lawyers, eager to curry favor with the formidable partner. Another voice murmured, just loud enough for Clara to hear, "Maybe she's just here to mop the floor after." Clara remained still, her expression unchanged, save for a slight softening around her eyes. Not from hurt, but from a deep sadness at what she was witnessing, the corruption of a profession meant to uphold justice, not mock those seeking it. And then it happened. "Clara," a voice said calmly from the bench. The entire courtroom went silent, head swiveling toward the judge. Judge Franklin Jensen was looking directly at her, his expression professional, but with unmistakable warmth in his eyes. "Would you join me in chambers for a moment?" The room stilled completely. Harper Wren's expression shifted from smugness to confusion. The junior associates exchanged bewildered glances. Clara nodded gracefully and followed the judge through the side door to his private chambers. 5 minutes later, they returned. Judge Jensen resumed his position on the bench with his customary dignity. Clara stood beside him, her posture relaxed but confident. "Before we proceed with today's docket," the judge announced, his voice resonating with quiet authority, "I would like to address a matter of professional conduct that has come to my attention." The attorneys shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "This court recognizes Mrs. Clara Jensen," he continued, gesturing toward her, "founder of the Jensen Initiative and my wife of 15 years. The silence that followed was absolute. Several attorneys went pale. A pen dropped. Someone muttered a curse under their breath. Clara said nothing. She didn't need to. The silence did it for her. Harper Wren's face drained of color as the realization of what had just transpired washed over her. The junior associate who had made the first disparaging comment looked as though he might be ill. "I am disappointed." Judge Jensen continued, scanning the room deliberately. "Not by your ignorance of her identity, that is understandable, but by your eagerness to judge her based solely on appearance. When we speak of justice in these hallowed halls, we often forget its first rule. Dignity, without it, law is merely performance." His gaze settled on Harper Wren, who had recovered enough composure to straighten her spine, though her knuckles were white as she gripped her leather portfolio. "Mrs. Jensen is not here in an official capacity today. She is here because she cares about the outcome of a case involving a vulnerable citizen of our community. Her presence is not only appropriate, but commendable. It represents the very best of what our legal system should aspire to: compassion alongside competence." The judge paused, allowing his words to sink in. "We will now proceed with the docket as scheduled. The Lopez eviction case will be heard first." What followed was perhaps the most attentive hearing that courtroom had ever witnessed. Harper Wren, normally aggressive and dismissive toward pro se litigants, was uncharacteristically measured in her arguments. The junior associates sat rigid in their seats, avoiding eye contact with both Clara and the judge. Maria Lopez, bolstered by Clara's quiet presence in the gallery behind her, presented her case with trembling hands, but clear conviction. Judge Jensen listened carefully to both sides before ruling that the eviction notice was indeed retaliatory and therefore invalid under Massachusetts tenant protection laws. After court adjourned, Judge Jensen called for a private meeting in his chambers. Clara stood by his side, quiet but resolute, as every associate who had participated in the mockery was invited in. They entered cautiously like school children, summoned to the principal's office, standing awkwardly before the judge's desk. "You are expecting disciplinary action," Judge Jensen stated matter-of-factly. That would be the traditional response. No one dared to speak, then he surprised them. "You will not be punished," he said, "but you will learn." He explained that each of them would be assigned to a month of pro bono work at the Jensen Initiative, working directly with clients facing the kinds of challenges that Maria Lopez had encountered. One associate, Jake Reynolds, the very one who had made the first disparaging comment, cleared his throat nervously. "Is that mandatory, Your Honor?" Before the judge could answer, Clara spoke for the first time since the revelation of her identity. Her voice was gentle but carried a quiet strength that commanded attention more effectively than any shout could have. "No, it isn't mandatory," she said, "but your future clients will judge you not by your GPA or your firm's reputation, but by your heart and your willingness to see them as human beings worthy of dignity. Choose wisely." The young attorneys filed out, shoulders hunched under the weight of their humbling. Harper Wren was the last to leave, pausing at the door to look back at Clara. "I've opposed your husband in court for years," she said stiffly. "He's always been fair, even when ruling against my clients." Clara nodded, acknowledging the awkward olive branch. "Perhaps," Harper continued hesitantly, "your organization could use some pro bono hours from a senior partner as well." Clara's smile was genuine. "We never turn away willing hands, especially those with experience." 4 weeks later, Jake Reynolds stood inside the crowded offices of the Jensen Initiative. The space was modest compared to his firm's sleek downtown headquarters. Fluorescent lighting instead of chandeliers. Practical furniture instead of Italian leather walls lined with resource materials. Rather than expensive art, but there was an energy here that his firm lacked, a sense of purpose that transcended billable hours and partner track ambitions. Across the table sat Elena Vasquez, a single mother with 3 children, and a restraining order, hearing scheduled for the following morning. Her ex-husband had violated previous orders twice, and she was terrified that the system would fail her again. Jake helped her draft a detailed affidavit drawing on his litigation experience to ensure that every relevant detail was properly documented. As he handed her the completed document, explaining how she should present it to the judge, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years of corporate practice, the satisfaction of knowing his skills had made a tangible difference in someone's safety. As Elena thanked him, tears of relief in her eyes, Jake looked up to see Clara standing quietly nearby, observing without interfering. "Thank you," he said to her when Elena had left. "I didn't know how blind I was until I saw what real justice looks like." Clara's response was characteristically understated. "We all have blind spots, Mr. Reynolds. The difference is in what we do once they're revealed to us." The next time Clara returned to court, no one questioned where she stood or what she wore. It wasn't because they now knew she was married to the judge. It was because they had learned something more fundamental than courtroom hierarchy, that character speaks without words and dignity doesn't need to dress up to be seen. In the following months, the Jensen Initiative saw an unprecedented influx of pro bono hours from Boston's top law firms. Months later, Harper Wren sat beside Clara at a community legal clinic, sleeves rolled up, eyes focused as she reviewed a custody case file. "Funny," she whispered. "All these years I thought I knew what justice looked like, but it never looked like this." Harper eventually joined the nonprofit's board of directors, bringing her formidable legal expertise to serve those she once would have dismissed. The program expanded to 3 additional locations throughout Massachusetts, serving thousands more clients who would otherwise have navigated the legal system alone. Clara continued to wear her simple clothes and practical shoes. She still carried the same worn leather bag that had belonged to her mother. But now when she entered a courtroom, people saw beyond the surface. They saw a woman whose power came not from appearance or title, but from an unwavering commitment to seeing the humanity in every person who crossed her path. Judge Franklin Jensen continued his distinguished career on the federal bench, known for his fairness and insight. But in legal circles, a new phrase began to circulate, the Jensen Standard, referring not to a legal precedent, but to a higher bar of professional conduct that demanded attorneys look beyond credentials and appearances to the fundamental dignity of every person involved in the legal process. Together, the Jensens transformed their corner of the legal world, not through grandstanding or revolution, but through the quiet power of example, showing that true justice begins with seeing others clearly beyond the facades we all construct. Because in the end, it isn't the robes we wear or the titles we claim that reveal our character. It's how we treat others when we believe no one of consequence is watching. And in a world that often mistakes appearance for substance, that lesson proves more powerful than any courtroom victory could ever be. And you reading this, have you ever judged someone based on how they looked or been judged and stayed silent? Perhaps your story could help change someone else's perspective, because dignity doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it simply stands quietly in a gray dress, waiting for the world to see beyond appearances.